The hallway of Brenton Military Academy pulsed with echoes of boots, clipped commands, and polished pride. Marble floors reflected the rigid order of it all, every uniform pressed, every voice trained to carry authority. But the silence cracked that morning, like thunder cracking across glass. "Hey, tar girl, you lost?" The words sliced through the air, laced with mockery and venom. Everyone turned. There she stood, Zariah Ellison. Tall, black, and wrapped in stillness. Her uniform blazer hung neat over her shoulders, her dreadlocks tied back into a clean knot. A scholarship cadet. A ghost to most, but no longer. From across the corridor strode Bryce Langford, captain of the fencing team, son of a retired colonel and the kind of boy who never heard no without laughing. He swaggered forward, flanked by his usual shadows, Trent, Max, and Nolan, all lean, pale-faced boys who believed the academy was theirs to inherit. Zariah didn't move. Bryce stepped closer, boots clicking with deliberate force. "I said you lost, cadet. This wing's for legacy families only. You don't belong here." Still, she said nothing, not a twitch. Not a blink, Trent scoffed. "She mute or just too dumb to know better?" Max chuckled. "Maybe she thinks she's better than us." Bryce leaned forward, close enough that his breath fogged the metal on her chest. His fingers reached out, bold and stupid. He flicked one of her dreadlocks. "Bet you cry easy." The hall held its breath. Still, Zariah stood calm, unshaken. "Nothing to say?" Bryce's voice rose, louder now. "You afraid to speak, or just used to being silent?" And finally, she spoke. Her voice was low, composed, icy. "You're mistaking silence for weakness." Bryce blinked. His smirk faltered. But the boys behind him laughed harder. "Please," Nolan sneered. "What are you gonna do? Quote poetry at us?" Bryce shoved her shoulder hard. In that split second, everything changed. Zariah pivoted, one smooth motion. She caught Bryce's wrist mid-shove, spun, and dropped him with a hip throw so fast the sound of his body slamming into the floor echoed like a gunshot. His head hit the tile with a dull thud. Groans. Phones came out. She stood over him. "You touched me," she said. "This is me touching back." Silence swallowed the corridor. Even the instructors at the far end paused. Bryce groaned, stunned, his wrist pinned beneath Zariah's knee. He looked up at her, eyes wide. "Get off me!" Zariah leaned in, voice barely a whisper. "Don't mistake training for temperament." Then she stood, composed, calm, and walked away. The video spread like wildfire. A black cadet slamming down the academy's golden boy in full uniform. It hit 10,000 views before last period. By dinner, it was a headline on cadet chatter. The caption read, "Langford gets lit up by shadow cadet, instant karma." But behind the virality, something darker stirred, because Bryce Langford wasn't done, and next time, he wouldn't be alone. The night cloaked Brenton Academy in silence, but inside Dormitory C, the air crackled with rage. Bryce sat on the edge of his bunk, cradling a cold pack against his wrist. His knuckles were red, not from impact, but from shame. Across from him, Trent scrolled through his phone. "Half the school's seen it already," he muttered. "Even the alumni board's buzzing. They're calling her the Quiet Flame." Max whistled low. "That flip was clean, though," Bryce snapped. "She humiliated me." Silence. Then Nolan asked, voice careful, "So, what now?" Bryce stood slowly, tossing the ice pack to the floor. His jaw clenched. His eyes were hard cold. "She wants to play soldier? Fine, but this isn't over. No cameras next time, no witnesses." Trent hesitated. "You sure about this, man?" "She flipped you." Bryce cut him off. "She caught me off guard, that's all. I'm not losing my rep over some charity case." They nodded, but none of them looked convinced. Meanwhile, across campus, Zariah sat on the rooftop of the library, legs crossed beneath her, eyes on the horizon. Below, the campus buzzed with whispers and speculation. Up here, it was quiet. Just like her, a gentle breeze played with the edge of her journal. She closed it, her fingers brushing a photo tucked inside, her older brother, Marcus, in his marine dress blues. Beneath the photo, one sentence in her handwriting. Strength doesn't speak. It moves. Her phone buzzed. A new message. Coach saw the video. You okay? She typed back. Zariah. Solid. He'll walk again. A pause. Then, coach him. They won't take this lying down. Stay sharp. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. She knew. The next day, the academy hummed with new energy. Students parted when Zariah walked through. Some nodded. Some whispered. A few tried to talk to her. She gave them quiet smiles but didn't stop walking. At fencing practice, Bryce stood opposite her, blade in hand. He had requested the duel, publicly, framed it as a friendly match. Everyone knew it wasn't. Coach Thorne raised a brow. You're sure about this, Langford? Bryce smirked. Dead sure. Zariah tied her mask and stepped onto the strip without a word. The whistle blew. Bryce lunged, fast, aggressive, desperate. Zariah moved like smoke, parried, sidestepped, riposted. His strikes were wild. Hers were deliberate. Touch, touch, touch. 3 points, clean, match over in under 2 minutes. The crowd was stunned. Bryce ripped off his mask, panting, face flushed with humiliation. You think this means you've won? Zariah turned her mask in her hands, then looked him in the eye. There's nothing to win. I just refuse to lose. Then she walked off the strip to thunderous silence. That night, Bryce's father showed up, General Langford. Bronze star, 2 tours, and a temper that made men cower. Zariah watched from the dorm stairwell as the man stormed into the commandant's office. He was shouting, furious, and though she couldn't hear every word, she heard enough. A disgrace. Undermining tradition. She doesn't belong. She closed her eyes. There it was, not just Bryce, but the system behind him. And that system was about to bite back. The morning after General Langford's visit, the academy felt altered, not overtly. Nothing said aloud. But the air was colder, the stairs were longer, and the silence was loaded. Zariah noticed it the moment she stepped into the mess hall. Her usual table, near the back, quiet. Near the windows had 2 cadets already sitting there. First years. They saw her coming, froze, then quickly gathered their trays and moved without a word. She sat anyway. Forks paused in midair across the room. Conversations died halfway through sentences. A few laughed, nervously, like they were trying to unsee the video still circulating online. But Zariah didn't flinch. Her back straight, her eyes focused. The system had noticed her now, and systems don't like being challenged. Midday came with mandatory drills. Cadets lined up on the west field under the hard sun. Zariah was among them, boots tight, expression calm. Commandant Rilland stood at the front, tall, gray-haired, expression carved from granite. I understand, he said, that some of you believe our rules no longer apply. No one breathed. That duels can be issued on impulse. That physical confrontations can be recorded and paraded like trophies. That legacy means nothing. His eyes scanned the line, paused just slightly on Zariah. Well, we are Brenton, and at Brenton, we remember why we wear this uniform. It is not for spectacle, it is for service, for order. He stepped back. Langford, Ellison, front. Zariah stepped forward beside Bryce, who smirked like a boy already told he'd won. You two will lead the night exercise. The Ridge March. Murmurs. Zariah blinked. That wasn't protocol. The Ridge March was a brutal navigation task. 5 miles through unlit forest trails, with only compasses and instinct. It was used for advanced field cadets, not second years. Never mixed gender pairs. She caught the glint in Bryce's eyes. This wasn't training. It was a trap. Later that evening, as twilight draped the academy in gold, she stood at the edge of the woods, map in hand, heart steady. Ready, princess? Bryce said, pulling on gloves. Try not to cry when we're lost. I won't be the one lost, she said, eyes ahead. They started together. The first mile was silence, broken only by crunching leaves and snapping twigs. Then the trail thinned. That's when Bryce began to fall behind, intentionally. Twice he bumped her shoulder. Once he accidentally grabbed her compass, claiming confusion. At the third mile, he stopped entirely. Shortcut, he said, pointing off trail. That's not the route, Zariah replied. Who's gonna know? She stared at him. He smirked. Then walked into the trees. She waited 10 seconds. Then followed, not because she trusted him, but because she knew him. The shortcut led to a clearing, moonlight slicing through tree branches. There, in the middle, stood Max and Nolan, waiting. Zariah stopped 5 feet away, calm, but coiled. This what training looks like to you? She asked. Bryce stepped beside her. Nah, this is what reckoning looks like. Max pulled out a taser. Nolan held zip ties. Say something now, Bryce whispered. I dare you. Zariah's fingers curled, but then, a rustle. Leaves shifting. A shadow stepped out from the darkness. Trent, his voice low. This wasn't the plan. Bryce glared. You want out now? Trent looked at Zariah. At the weapons. At his hands. I didn't sign up to jump someone. Max stepped forward. Too late now, man. You're in. But Trent shook his head and walked away. Coward! Bryce shouted after him. Then he turned back to Zariah. Let's finish this, he charged. But she was already moving. This wasn't a duel. It was survival. Bryce's fist cut through the air like a hammer falling. Zariah didn't duck. She slipped, a breath to the left, then pivoted, catching his arm mid-swing. In one fluid move, she pulled him off balance, flipped him over her shoulder, and sent him crashing into the forest floor with a bone-jarring thud. Max charged with the taser raised. She spun low, sweeping his legs clean out from under him. He hit the ground hard, air bursting from his lungs in a choking grunt. The taser skittered into the underbrush. Nolan froze, wide-eyed, halfway between running and remembering he wasn't built for combat. Zariah looked at him and didn't move. That was enough. He dropped the zip ties and ran into the trees. Bryce groaned behind her, pushing himself onto his elbows. His face was smeared with dirt, his pride shredded. You think you've won? He spat. Zariah turned slowly, her breath steady, the moonlight catching the soft sheen of sweat on her cheek. No, she said quietly. I think you just lost. Max groaned from the ground. She's a damn machine. I told you, Zariah said, crouching beside Bryce. Don't confuse quiet with powerless. Bryce tried to lunge, a wild, desperate move, but she stopped him with a swift strike to his sternum. Not enough to break. Just enough to take the air out of him. He crumpled back with a wheeze. Zariah stood. Then she heard it. Footsteps. More than one. A beam of light sliced through the woods, flashlights. Barking voices. In here. Coach Marlowe burst into the clearing, flanked by 2 other instructors. The scene froze. Bryce wheezing, Max groaning, zip ties on the ground, Zariah standing alone. What the hell happened here? Marlowe demanded. Bryce opened his mouth. She attacked. She defended herself, Trent said, stepping out of the shadows behind the coaches. Everyone turned. I saw everything, Trent continued. They ambushed her. She didn't start it. She ended it. Silence. Zariah met Marlowe's eyes. He nodded once. We'll sort this out, now. The disciplinary hearing happened the next day. Wood-paneled room, long table, cold stairs. Bryce sat flanked by his father, General Langford, his face a storm in human form. Zariah sat alone, no family, just the weight of her truth. Principal Holloway spoke first. We've reviewed the footage from Cadet Ellison's body cam, he said. We've reviewed testimony. It is clear. Cadet Langford and his associates planned and executed an authorized physical ambush during the Ascension training event. General Langford slammed a fist on the table. "That girl lured my son. She defended herself," Holloway said, cutting him off. "And unlike your son, she followed protocol." Bryce's face twisted in disbelief. "You're siding with her?" Holloway leaned forward, his voice like a scalpel. "I'm siding with honor. Something you clearly forgot." The verdict: Bryce suspended indefinitely, Max and Nolan expelled, Trent spared for stepping in, and Zariah promoted. Honor commendation, public acknowledgement during the cadet ceremony. But she didn't smile when they handed her the medal. She simply looked at it, then slipped it into her pocket. Later that evening, alone in her dorm, she opened her journal, scribbled a single line beneath her brother's photo. Sometimes silence isn't survival. Sometimes it's strategy. She closed the book, but her story was just beginning. Because the system may have taken a hit, but it wasn't finished. And Zariah? She'd just become its most dangerous opponent. The gymnasium was packed. Hundreds of cadets stood in perfect rows, uniforms crisp, faces unreadable. The annual honor assembly was sacred, a showcase of discipline, tradition, and reputation. Every word spoken here echoed beyond the walls. Principal Holloway stepped to the podium. His voice rang out clear. "This year we acknowledge not just achievement, but character. Not just skill, but restraint. And not just strength, but integrity under fire." He turned to the side. Cadet Zariah Ellison. Front and center, she walked down the aisle, slow and steady. Not a single footstep out of line. As she climbed the stairs, a whisper ran through the crowd. Not disrespect, awe, quiet, sharp, undeniable. Holloway handed her a plaque. "For exemplary conduct under duress. For reminding this institution of its values when others forgot them." Applause rose, uneven at first, but then louder. Stronger. Even some of the seniors clapped. But not all. From the shadows of the last row stood a man with arms crossed, eyes like ice, Colonel Nathaniel Blake, former Academy alumnus, member of the board, and close ally of the Langford family. He leaned toward the man beside him. "She's a problem," he muttered. "Or a lesson," the other replied. Blake shook his head. "No, she's an interruption." Later that night, Zariah stood in the empty locker room, changing out of her ceremonial uniform. The applause had faded. The eyes had turned away, but the pressure, that remained. She turned toward her locker and froze. Something was taped to the door, a photo. It showed her brother, Marcus, in combat fatigues, smiling, alive. Underneath, scribbled in red marker, "Even warriors fall." Zariah didn't move for a full minute. Then she peeled the photo down, folded it once, and tucked it into her journal. She already knew what they were doing. Sight games. Intimidation. A desperate last grasp of power. They wanted her afraid. They wanted her reactive. But Zariah didn't play their game. She rewrote it. The next day, whispers followed her again, but this time they were darker. Rumors of her disrespecting tradition, of her exploiting trauma for attention. Someone had edited the original footage of the hallway confrontation to make it look like she'd instigated the fight. A smear campaign. And it was spreading fast. By lunch, a forged disciplinary record had been posted on the anonymous student forum. By dinner, someone had snuck into her dorm and poured bleach on her bed sheets. Still, she didn't react. Not publicly. But that night, she walked into the Central Archives, the room where student files, security logs, and faculty communications were stored. A room most cadets never entered. But Zariah had access. She'd earned it. Under the flicker of old fluorescent lights, she began digging. Not for revenge, for proof. Because if they wanted a war, they were about to find out who taught her how to fight one. And it wasn't just Marcus. It was a mother who hacked networks before Zariah could read. a father who taught her chess with military maps, and a life that taught her silence doesn't mean surrender. Across campus, Bryce sat in the back of a black SUV, his father in the front, Colonel Blake in the shadows beside him. "She's not backing down," Bryce muttered. "She won't have to," Blake said. He handed Bryce a sealed envelope. "Because we're going to break her without laying a single finger." The envelope contained poison. Not literal, something worse. Inside, Bryce found a dossier. Grainy photos of Zariah meeting Coach Marlowe outside academy hours. Printed emails taken out of context. Fabricated text messages suggesting favoritism. Even falsified payment records. All doctored. All designed to do one thing. Make it look like Zariah had cheated her way to the top. "Circulate it anonymously," Colonel Blake said. "Let it spread like wildfire. We don't need to accuse her. We just need to ask the question, how much of her power was real?" Bryce hesitated, the weight of it hitting him. "Is this even legal?" Blake smiled faintly. "No, but it's tradition." Bryce looked out the window. For the first time, even he seemed unsure. But he did it. The file went live that night, leaked through a private alumni network which filtered it through online student forums. The headline read, "Rising Star or Fabricated Hero. Zariah Ellison under investigation." The reaction was swift. Comments exploded. Some defended her. Others outed her. Faculty grew quiet. Students grew cold. Even Coach Marlowe received an internal audit notice. Zariah walked into morning drills like she always did. Spine tall, face unreadable, but she felt it. The shift, the weight. The eyes that once watched in awe now watched in suspicion. And she let them. Because while they watched, she worked. For days, she buried herself in the archives after lights out, cross-checking server logs, tracing the IPs, studying handwriting on forged documents. Every piece mattered. Every breadcrumb. She found one. An image buried in the metadata of a forged PDF. A name, Langford_honor, docs, amateur mistake. But it was enough. She copied everything onto a drive. Then she did something unexpected. She requested a public hearing. Principal Holloway raised an eyebrow. "You don't have to do this, Cadet Ellison." "I do," she said quietly. "Because this isn't about me anymore." The assembly was held in the central hall. Not just cadets, faculty, board members, even press. Bryce arrived with his father, jaw clenched. Blake sat beside them, arms folded, expression smug. Zariah stood alone at the front. No lawyers, no fanfare. Just her and a drive. She plugged it into the display terminal and spoke calmly. "What you've seen online was designed to dismantle me. To make you question not just my actions, but my right to stand where I stand." She clicked once. Screens lit up. Side-by-side comparisons. Metadata trails. Original emails. Timestamps. Fabrication layers. The Langford file name glowing like a confession. "None of what you were shown was real," she said. "But the intent behind it, that was. And I won't be silent about it anymore." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Principal Holloway stood, arms crossed, jaw tight. Bryce paled. Blake stood abruptly. "This is a setup." "No," Holloway snapped. "This is the truth." "And you brought disgrace into the school." Security moved in. Blake didn't resist. But his eyes locked with Zariah's on the way out. "This isn't over." She didn't blink. "No, it's just beginning." Later that night, Zariah walked alone through the quiet courtyard. For the first time in weeks, she let herself breathe. But only for a moment, because real silence was coming. And this time, it wouldn't be hers. 3 days passed. The academy was in lockdown mode, not physically, but reputationally. Statements were issued, emails sent, meetings held in hushed voices behind glass walls. Colonel Blake had resigned from the board. General Langford had gone silent. Bryce vanished from public view, but Zariah knew better. Power doesn't disappear. It waits, and in silence, it plots. She returned to her routines, drills, study, training, but everything had changed. Now when she passed in the hallway, Cadet stepped aside with purpose, not fear. Not awe, respect, yet something still hovered beneath it all. A pressure, a shadow that hadn't lifted. One night, as rain pelted the rooftops and wind carved through the gutters, she received a message. No name, no number. Just one line, "You're not done. Check the vault." It was unsigned, but she knew the term. The vault was code among cadet elites for the archive's restricted terminal. A digital filing system, off-grid, hidden beneath layers of admin firewalls. Only staff had access. Only staff and Zariah. Because months ago, after acing the systems exam, she'd been offered a temporary IT rotation. Most cadets used it to sneak breaks or boost their grades. She used it to learn everything. Now standing alone in the archive's glow, she unlocked the hidden drive. What she found made her blood freeze. Not about her, but about others, decades of records. Evidence of suppressed complaints, altered admission scores, hidden assault reports, all pointing to a network of cover-ups designed to protect legacy families. Blake wasn't the architect, just the enforcer. Zariah scrolled deeper. One file stopped her cold. M. Ellison death inquiry. Her brother, Marcus, she clicked. And the truth came crashing down like thunder. His death hadn't been from friendly fire, as reported. It had been a failed extraction in a private operation, funded in part by a Brenton board member. An illegal one. Covered, sanitized, blamed on the enemy. Marcus had known. He'd been silenced. The truth burned behind her eyes, but she stayed still. She copied everything, then shut the terminal down. The next morning, she submitted her resignation, not from Brenton. From silence, she requested a closed-door tribunal with Holloway, the board, and legal counsel. Not for revenge, not for spectacle. For accountability. She laid out everything, from Bryce's ambush to Blake's sabotage to the corruption deep in the Academy's core. No leaks, no posts, just facts. You realize what you're doing? Holloway asked, voice low. Yes, she replied. I'm doing what this uniform was supposed to mean. The board sat stunned. No one interrupted. When she was done, she stood. I don't want to destroy Brenton, she said. I want to redeem it. She walked out without waiting for a decision. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air felt different, cleansed, but her work wasn't over. Because truth is like fire, and once it catches, it spreads. 1 week later, the storm broke. Brenton Academy called an emergency press conference, rare, public, and mandatory for all students and faculty. Reporters gathered near the east lawn. News vans lined the stone walls like vultures. The podium stood under the Academy crest, surrounded by uneasy silence. Zariah watched from the back of the crowd, not hiding, just observing. Principal Holloway stepped up, papers in hand. His eyes scanned the assembly, then landed squarely on the students. Today, he said, Brenton does something few institutions dare. We admit we failed. Gasps, murmurs, whispers rising. For too long, Holloway continued, a culture of protection, manipulation, and intimidation has existed within these walls, led by powerful alumni, inherited privilege, and enforced silence. He looked directly at the cameras now. But silence has a cost, and it ends today. He began reading names, resignations, expulsions, indictments. Bryce Langford was expelled. His father, General Langford, under federal investigation for misconduct. Colonel Blake, charged with evidence tampering and obstruction of justice. The board, dissolved for restructuring. Coach Marlowe stepped beside Holloway. We owe this change, he said, to one, a cadet who chose courage over comfort, integrity over image, and truth over tradition. Zariah's name was called. She walked forward, calm and steady, as the crowd parted. But she didn't take the mic. Instead, she turned to face her peers. "You were taught that silence is discipline," she said softly. "But real discipline is using your voice when the cost is high. Real honor is uncomfortable." She paused. "And real strength?" Her eyes scanned the younger cadets in the front row. "It isn't loud. It listens. It learns. And when the time comes, it stands." She stepped down. And the crowd, silent for half a beat, erupted. It wasn't the kind of applause that followed tradition. It was the sound of a generation waking up. That night, Zarya sat in the courtyard beneath the stars, her journal open beside her. She didn't write anything this time. Just pulled out the old photo of Marcus. She placed it on her knee, then lit a small flame beneath it. Not to destroy, but to release. The flame danced for a moment, then faded into the night air. She whispered, barely audible, "You didn't fall in vain." 2 months later, Zarya transferred. Not to another military school, but to an institute that trained future policy leaders. Her application essay, a simple title, "The Power of Stillness." No drama, no revenge, no need to prove anything. Because the war was never just about her. It was about breaking a cycle. And she had, not with volume, not with fists, but with fire. The kind that doesn't rage, the kind that burns quietly and never dies.